Hi, I'm Jeremy Newberry, a cybersecurity architect and solution strategist here at Merlin Cyber. And with me today is Deepak from Alation. And we're going to talk a bit about how cybersecurity, data cataloging, and data science all move together, and really kind of get an idea of where it fits into the market and how we can answer a lot of really important questions. Deepak?
Hey everybody, my name is Deepak Nelly. I'm with Alation. I'm head of sales engineering for Alation. I've been with Alation for 6.5 years. Before that, I was with other large data analytics company. I've been in the data space for the last 20 plus years. I've done data and analytics throughout my career. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you. So one of the interesting things that we hear out in the world is we think about it from a cybersecurity and zero trust aspect is data science, and the data pillar itself has been largely ignored. It's one of the last ones to be struck, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to go after network. It's easier to go after applications, identity. That data pillar is really sat there for a while. And if you remember right, there's a term, data culture, maturity modeling. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we can apply that in the world?
Absolutely. The data culture maturity model is a kind of an old concept. It's been around for a while. Different companies have taken a stab at creating a model, and there is a company called DCAM. They have their own maturity models. But what we have done from Alation perspective is we have basically taken that model, simplified it for our customers so they can do this assessment of data maturity assessment quickly. End of the day, a data maturity assessment model basically empowers agencies to gauge their data culture maturity level in areas such as data governance, search and discovery, data leadership, and data literacy.
Now, this is the first one, data governance. When we start talking about data governance itself, what are we including in that? Like, what is that? Traceability? Is that just logistics? Is that metadata sitting on top of it?
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
So data governance, different companies or different customers have a different definition of data governance, by the way. So from your security, governance is something different than what I talk about from a data perspective. Governance is different. End of the day, what we believe a governance is making sure our users of our data are using data correctly, they're using the trusted data, and they're using the data properly. That's our definition of governance. So they're not, go on, sorry.
No. So if we're talking about using it properly, data in particular, are we talking about, say, for instance, preventing data leakage? Are we talking about insider threat? Are we talking, simply that data is being used by the incorrect people or by the right people? Is that kind of that traceability concept?
Absolutely. So we want to make sure the people with the right access controls are using the right data. So that is the basic principle of governance. So the example you gave me about, somebody without having the right credentials accessing data.
Like say Snowden, for instance.
Exactly.
Somebody who had credentials, but shouldn't have had access to the type of data he is.
Exactly. And I'm going to use an anecdote. Maybe this is not the right time, but I'll still, about the same example you gave me. Data governance is like a seatbelt, right? Okay. When you are not in an accident, it's pointless. When you're in an accident, you start thinking like, oh, what did I not have in place? So it really is one of those things that when you look at your data or when you're looking to make data available to all your users within your organization to make the decisions correctly and in a timely manner, you need to also have a governance practice that is not too rigid. You don't want people from not accessing the data. You want to be able to give them access to the right data at the right time.
So if we're talking about the data culture maturity model, and we're talking about governance, where in that maturity model would something like that be? Is that at the very beginning? Is that way down the road? Or is that something we can get to?
That's a great question, Jeremy, because when most customers don't know how to tackle their data governance or their data leadership or data literacy program. So maturity model gives them a guided step-by-step navigation way where they can take this assessment, which is a very simple assessment, takes about 20 minutes, and the result workshop is about 3 hours. It is a very short engagement. It is not an exhaustive consulting engagement. Okay. It's a very short for our customers. Once they get their assessment result, it basically tells them where they are currently and where they want to go in the future. So we also break down this assessment, what different areas, including data governance, data discovery, data leadership, and data classification. These are what we call 4 tenets of data maturity model. The reason we have done this way is we have worked with a lot of customers in this area, and we have taken experience from those customers in this assessment. Also, these customers are also using these assessment to improve themselves and to grow with that, because it's not like a one-time strategy. Data strategy is an ongoing strategy. So
wait, it's not one. So it's not a snapshot in time. It's a continuous.
It's a continuous
assessment?
process. So
Okay.
yes, it's most of our customers have been doing this, and they have been on the data journey, and they're still looking to grow that data journey.
So if we're thinking about classification, right? So we've discovered the data, we've looked at the tables. So for instance, here's a database table, and I'm able to define whether there's PII in it, whether there's classified information, where you're in the government world, obviously we're talking about classified, unclassified, and various levels. How do we take that, look at that metadata and still provide a hidden visibility to it, right? So provide zero trust against that metadata, right? We were discussing earlier, zero trust, in a lot of ways, zero trust is the antithesis to data science, because data science is all about democratization, data sharing, especially in like a research or university realm. How do we square that with zero trust, which says you should only be able to see this little bit that you're allowed to? How do we kind of square that idea?
It's a great question, actually. So one of the tenets in our data discoverability processes, when we look at the actual metadata, we classify, just like you said earlier, what field is PII. If there is a date of birth, maybe we want to call it PII. So we look at that, and we also look at the usage of data too. Who is accessing the data? What table, what schema is being accessed by users? So we basically build a map of the usage of data and classification of data. Once you have that information, you can implement zero trust on seeing what of these data sets needs to absolutely have no access to anybody, because there may be some data that maybe should be open for everybody, and we have decided, not knowingly, not closed it. So having that ability to discover the data, who's using it, and classifying the data at the same time allows the security team and the data team to give access to the right people.
So if that's the case, let's step back into that insider threat kind of portfolio. Let's say, because of your traceability, and because of the ability to say, hey, this user is accessing this data at this time, I could then either run a report inside Alation or export that to, say, a SIM and a SOAR that would say, this is anomalous. Bob has never connected to this before. Matter of fact, Bob's now connected to 15 sources he's never connected to before. And because of the traceability option and the reporting that you're providing, I now have that data to go back and actually not only report on it, but then maybe take action with another solution along the way.
You're absolutely right. So when Alation is when we go what we call a catalog the data sets. So when we first time connect to the data set, pull the metadata, look at the usage, and look at the logs. What I mean by that is, if Jeremy ran certain queries, I would be able to see how many queries you ran, how long did the query take, all that information is available to me. So to answer your question, if that falls outside the norm, so that maybe like Jeremy was not supposed to be accessing database, or he is accessing certain queries at a certain threshold on a certain day.
That seems very like a Jeremy thing.
Exactly. You can write a query within Alation, because Alation has this component called Alation Analytics. That is, any clicks usage on our product is captured in Alation Analytics. The idea behind that is to look at the usage, who is accessing the catalog, what kind of metadata is being accessed. That is the reason for that. So you could write a query to do what you just described earlier.
Let's rephrase that for a second. So tell me a little bit about Alation Analytics and how I can use that both from an insider threat or from a data security perspective.
Sure. So Alation Analytics, the premise of Alation Analytics is to basically provide the users, the administrators of Alation, to look at how much usage they have gotten from their catalog. What I mean by that is when somebody decides to get into a data program and deploy Alation catalog, they want to be able to realize certain value. Are we getting the right data objectives being measured and captured in Alation? Are we meeting our business goals? Alation Analytics is primarily designed to do that kind of information. As part of Alation Analytics, we also collect auditing information. Who accessed what queries, what tables. That information is also available to you. So a administrator of Alation can run queries to find out who's accessing what data
And I could use an external source, like a SIM or SOAR, to do that as
It
well.
is a relational database.
To pull that
Absolutely.
information.
It's a relational database, and
Fantastic.
you can connect it to a BI tool or another repository and join them to get that information. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the future where we would say maybe apply a Gen AI against that type of data and be able to go even further? So has Bob accessed this lately?
So right now we have not done that, but however, we have a lot of partners using our metadata to give a little bit more context to the LLMs they're building. For example, like, in your question, you were asking about insider security. If I have the metadata cataloged in Alation Analytics, what table that data information is available, your Gen AI LLM model can go pull the metadata from the right table to build the answers that you're looking for.
So that's kind of interesting. Like, as we go forward, obviously the adoption of AI across the industry has been the hot topic for the last year and a half, right? And we've seen an explosion of either Gen AI, we're now up to agentic AI of one agent talking to another agent, et cetera. Really, how do we look at data science and data governance with the adoption of AI, right? Where's some of the, how do you see that moving forward?
Like one of the things what I have seen, based on our experience and every conversation that you probably see lately has been around AI. If you don't use, like somebody was saying,
if you don't just rub some AI.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't put an AI in subject line, people won't.
Right. You're obviously outdated technology. You're like Stone Age. If you
Exactly. But what's happening for the last 6 to 8 months is a lot of business leaders are seeing this right now. Not just but the AI, how you deploy AI and adopt AI. It's also about able to explainability, looking at the trust, the bias are the major issues that's blocking scaling AI across their organization.
Okay.
So again, given the rise of Gen AI, organizations are very concerned about the quality of data that's being fed into the AI model.
So how do we figure out from like either readiness perspective or what guardrails I've placed around that data?
Yeah.
Is that something we can use Alation?
Absolutely. Again, the idea behind that is organization will have to strike a delicate balance
just a little bit
between fast experimentation and development with governance, traceability, and transparency, right?
Okay.
So it is a delicate balance. So Alation can help with that. But end of the day, there has to be a certain distinct process within the organization to make this happen. And that's where the DCMA, the data maturity model, comes into play.
Okay.
One of the tenets in data maturity assessment is the data leadership. Does this program has the right sponsors? Is there a change management in the organization to drive some of these changes? So we help you get all that information through our data maturity assessment.
So you can also kind of use that to build when you're building the AI models itself of saying you're allowed access to these tables and this data sources, et cetera. I understand that Alation is not limiting that,
yes,
but using Alation to map out what data the AI should have available to it.
Correct. We can at least, end of the day, it's in the person building the model. So they can pick and choose which of the data from Alation can be fed into the model.
Okay.
So you are able to, by doing that, now the model, the person governing the AI governance team will know the data coming from Alation feeding into the AI model is governed. So we have taken care of any ethics, biases, transparency, etc. within our metadata when we push the data into an AI model.
So it's kind of interesting. Like the more and more we talk about DCMA across the board, both from an assessment perspective and also the maturity model, what are some of the big roadblocks that the agencies are, especially from the federal side, right? The federal is different from the commercial. What are the real roadblocks that the federal agencies are having?
The first one that comes to my mind is business value. If the agency does not have a roadmap that outlines the key use cases and how it relates to the organization strategy, if they don't have a properly defined business value, this is going to be a biggest blocker for them. So end of the day, what I mean by that is any data analytics team within the agency will have some objective. We want to make sure all our users are going to get access to the data right on time. Or maybe like a Veterans Affair, they want to be able to process the claims faster. So in order to process the claim faster, the people making the decisions should have access to data faster, right? So that is a business objective. So if we tie this specific effort to an objective for VA, that would be one of the business goals that we can target towards.
And really, when we're talking about federal agencies, it's always effect of the mission.
Yeah.
Right.
You're
How
right.
is it access to the data? How's that further the mission?
Yeah.
How does that make it faster? How does it make it better? How does it serve the constituents better overall? And that's really what when you
100%.
say,
You
like,
said
for
that.
instance,
That's the
NDA.
mission of that thing. Yes, that is tied. If it's tied to that, that's what I meant by business value.
Yep.
That's going to be one of the road blockers. If they don't have that done correctly, then these projects will not sustain. Also, second road blocker would be sponsorship.
Okay.
So if there is not a strong executive sponsorship on how it's engaged and how this is run, this will also hinder.
And in the
roadblocks
federal
too.
space, it's not just executive sponsorship, it's by all the contractors that are involved, because you have a variety of owners versus custodians of the data, creators of the data, constituents, Warner, and et cetera, of the data. How do you really, with Alation, you're able to map out
Correct.
each of the different roles and abilities?
Yeah, and what I mean by the executive sponsorship is somebody comprehensively driving from the top, saying that these are the different parties within my agency. I want them to all orchestrate this program to a certain mission. So that is what I mean by sponsor. And lastly is the change management. This may not be a pretty big thing for most.
No, it is.
It is like, I just say that sarcastically, but
Yeah.
change
That's
management.
sarcasm. Okay,
exactly.
that
Change
makes more
management
sense.
is probably should be in place because people, human beings, we often resist to change, but
Just
to
a
show
little
them the path the right way, why this is going to affect their jobs or how this is going to assuage certain issues they have in their job, that would be a huge benefit to unblock these projects. Yeah.
So we discussed a little bit earlier, kind of three different scenarios when it comes to federal agencies of the vast differences when it comes to data science and data access and democratization, right? If we were to talk about, say, Department of State or FBI even, right? Someone with real state secrets who still needs to catalog everything, but needs to protect even up to the metadata at the top versus, say, a CDC with research coming out of the labs where that data needs to be accessible by everybody, but we need to make sure the integrity of the data isn't changed from the research labs on up to its final process. Yeah, where does Alation fit into that concept? Because really both of those are data cataloging, but they're different effects and different access restrictions.
So you're saying like your external researchers will have access to data.
CDC perspective, absolutely.
Correct, exactly.
Where with, say, Department of State, it's internal actors, and we're specifically even down to the metadata, it's a secret.
Yeah.
So how do we figure that out?
So that is a very good question. This is a very common thing, that we see with a lot of customers, and this is what's called federation. Is that actual term? Because we want to organization can have catalog exactly.
Right.
Certain parts of the catalog is visible to certain people because of certain need, necessity, and certain part needs to be only be able to see certain data.
Okay.
So we allow that within our product. We can hide certain sources that people don't want to see that can be controlled through a security within the catalog.
Okay.
So, for example, in case of CDC, that may be like a far-fetched example. Maybe they don't want external people coming touching their catalog. They can have another instance of the federation catalog.
So that way, here's my moment of truth. Here's my vision of truth.
And these are for the researchers, for outside vendors, what have you.
Then I can compare them.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that way I can do, say, in the technical term, a munge of comparing this database set versus this database set and say, wait, there is a difference. There are no differences. We're at the right, from a data integrity perspective, I can even use that record.
Yes, if we architected that way, that is one of the reasons that they want to do it. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, fantastic.
The example I took, Jeremy, was like, somebody doesn't want to see a subset of the data. Because if I'm an internal CDC employee, I may need access to much more than what I'm providing the external auditors. And even when you give data to the external researchers, not auditors, researchers, you may want to obfuscate some data, right? Okay. That can be done through some security tools that allows you to hide certain columns or basically obfuscate certain columns. So when they see that data, they're not looking at Jeremy or the SSN number or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, so we've talked a fair bit about the data management, the data culture management model as a long way.
Yeah.
While I stutter over that, it's fantastic, DCMA.
Yeah.
If we're talking to a federal agency who's really just trying to get started and understanding where to begin in this project, right? Because most security folks, we're not data scientists, right? We normally restrict data, but the DCMA, the maturity model itself says that we need to move down this path. What are some ways and tools that we can go down there?
Yeah. So DCMA, like I call it data culture maturity assessment, It is a very short survey that we allow certain leaders within the organization to take this survey simultaneously so that we can compare the results where they are. End of the day, for a federal agency who's embarking on a data project, this will give them level set on their current state, where they are currently, right? And where they want to go in the future on 4 different areas. Like I said, data classification, governance, data discovery, data literacy is another project. Like there may be...
What is data literacy?
Absolutely.
You've mentioned that one. I'm going to stop you. What is that?
It is like it's an interesting word when you say literacy, right?
That's right. I can read, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. Right. We want to, goes beyond the data analytics team within an agency. We want to empower our users within our organization to use the data effectively. I mean, you've heard about this, like an adage called like data is a new oil, all these things.
Sure.
People want to be able to make decisions. The data analytics team is not the only team that's looking at the data. We want to empower everybody so they understand if I'm looking at a specific report or a scorecard, I know the definition of that metric that I'm looking at. We want to be able to allow everybody to understand what these numbers really mean.
Okay.
So data literacy is basically allowing the users in the organization to understand how data is being used within their business.
Okay. So
my point about that being, going back to my DCMA, when we do this assessment, we basically look at all these 4 areas. And a customer may say, you know what, we don't need help on that area yet because we want to take baby steps, which we recommend, by the way, because part of this assessment, once you know your level state, you can also look at it and say, this is the area that I want to improve. Maybe there is some security policies and data classification that we are lagging. We want to improve that. So you get to see what action you want to take from the output of DCMA.
So really, if we break it down, data discovering what data you have.
Correct.
Data governance, limiting and understanding who's accessing the data.
More than that, like, understanding, what my current state is,
right,
and how it's being accessed, and what policies do I need to apply and deploy.
Data literacy is
how do we empower, the data used through entire organization.
And data classification
and data leadership is the final one.
Oh, leadership.
Data leadership is again, looking at our how the kind of how the sponsorship of data is happening within the organization. So the data leadership kind of goes. Most of the times, when we talk about data leadership, it's usually brushed over.
Yeah.
Or people, dismiss it always. But many of the times people think like, I'm going to buy a tool or a data tool or a software tool, and this is going to fix my problem, right?
Okay.
That is never the case. You need a data program has to be done in a engagement way with the buy-in from the business users. And that can be basically driven by an executive sponsor within the agency who is saying, hey, we need to implement this program because it's going to help our business users and it's going to make their life easier day to day, whether it's about discovering data or,
If we were to rephrase data leadership, right? Data leadership is the leaders of the organization, owners of the data, creators of the data that want to understand how my data is being used and encourage better usage of it for furtherance of the mission.
Correct, exactly. And how it drives business outcomes. In other words, the mission statements, the mission. Once you understand that, and there is a sponsorship from the team, this is how we're going to drive, and you have buy-in from everybody else, and the program is going to be successful.
In the federal space, it's all about serving the constituents, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And furthering that mission. Yeah. So being able to better use that, better leverage that, because it's created, it's there, and we need to be able to better serve the public in that case.
Going back to my comment originally is that DCMA looks at all these 4 areas, and it comes with a score. And it rates you where you currently are, and then you can also the future state that you want to go in.
It kind of breaks it down into simple steps of start with data classification or meta. Or this is where you are.
Yeah, and it comes with a very clear, actionable steps.
Oh, so it doesn't sound like me at all.
No, it's
fantastic.
Exactly.
Okay,
so
good,
it's a very pointed thing saying that X, Y, and Z can be done. So after spending 3 hours with Alation team, you will have a clear, actionable steps that you can take back and start working on.
So once I do start it, say I've started down that role, are you just taking a single snapshot of my data and it's never to be updated again, or is this something that's a living data catalog?
It is a living data catalog.
It is alive.
So as part of your second question about where do they start, it also not only gives them the current state, it also allows them to prioritize what steps do I need to take? Which of these tenets do I need to focus on governance? Do I need to focus on discovery, which is the basic fundamental thing that drives any data programs? Or do I need to look at more of data leadership or data literacy? So this kind of gives you actionable step where you want to focus on.
Okay.
So I've never seen a single customer who says like, I want to do all 4 things at once, right? It is impossible.
Well, you're going to find somebody who says that, but then they fail.
Exactly.
Right.
That's
Anytime you
100%,
board the ocean, that is always a bad idea,
Yep.
regardless of where you go. Let's say I have an organization, because it's federal government, right? In my world, at least, could be commercial as well. There's huge amounts of legacy data, right? We live on massive data servers, data platforms, and there's a huge drive to move those from physical data centers into the cloud space, whether that's AWS Gov, whether that's FedRAMP, wherever the data resides. How can something like Alation help us with that move, right? Is that something where if I have a good data catalog, right? Let's say I don't. Yeah. How is it that you can help me move from the legacy state into a cloud space?
It's a great question. And some people call
the
it,
question.
Exactly. Some people call it digital
I
transformation.
even wrote it down first.
Okay, exactly. Some people call it digital transformation, or they call it cloud migration strategy. But end of the day is basically looking at what systems you currently have, how it is being used. Because if I want to move all my legacy analytics systems, the databases that I have to the cloud, it's pointless because first of all, going to the cloud is not cheaper, right? We all know that. So,
what?
Yeah.
What? You lie. No, it's cheaper. So everybody knows that. Yeah. But they don't.
So end of the day is like you will, by running the data catalog on your legacy system, we will look at the usage.
Okay.
What are the systems being used? How are they being deployed? So I only move the systems that are pertinent to my analytics to the cloud. So let me give an example.
Give me an example.
So I'm like in a part of an agency. We do a lot of claims, health and human services. We do a lot of provider claims, etc. And we do a lot of analytics to figure out, how the claims are being processed, what providers, what hospitals, etc., etc.
Okay.
So if I was running queries against a specific database and doing all these analytics, if I catalog Alation will show me, out of these 10,000 tables or 1,000 tables you have in your analytics database, only 100 tables are being really used for your analytics.
Okay.
Rest everything else is somebody built it in the past, it's never being used. So I don't need to forklift the entire analytics database.
So that gets directly into data literacy of how my data is being used, how often is it being used, is it being used in a proper way. It also tells me whether or not maybe people aren't aware that I had this extra data set. Right?
That's exactly. So most of the times people do not know what's in their analytics database. A catalog, basically the first thing of catalog, a tenet of the catalog in the maturity model is data discoverability. So once
it's
they
kind of
know
like helping people with ADHD who have doom piles everywhere.
Totally, 100%.
You're totally helping them catalog their doom piles. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I can guarantee you every geek out there
with ADHD would relate to that.
Oh, I get that.
I get
right.
that. Yeah.
So you're helping me find data in my doom piles. All right, yay. That's called data literacy. I now understand.
Yeah.
So we're moving to the cloud. You're saying, hey, look, this is data that's being used.
Yeah.
I'm going to move that to the cloud where it's faster, readier. Charlie can get it wherever Charlie goes, and we're good.
Yeah, and we don't physically actually write the code to move the data. What we would do is we would do it in a catalog tags. Somebody would go say, you know what? Yes, that's the data I want to move in. They can tag it, or they can automate it, saying that any data that's been accessed X amount of time, I want to move these tables or these schemas to the cloud.
Does that map things like for instance, I may only effectively go after these tables, but those tables are reliant on all this information in the back end. Right. Does it map that type of dependency as well?
100%.
Okay.
I mean, what in our world we call it data lineage.
Right.
So if I know the path of data lineage where the data comes from, I would need to bring all of them into the cloud,
or at least provide a map to
provide the map of that. Exactly. And most of the times is, again, the data lineage is one of the most important concepts. If somebody's making decision on the data, they would want to know what system that's pulling from, because you don't want to be going to a meeting with incorrect numbers. You know what I mean?
Not so much. Exactly. That's generally a really
and that's
fast
the term
way
I call it, data anxiety, and that's my patent, by the way.
Okay.
Data anxiety. Yeah, it alleviates data anxiety. Yeah.
Data anxiety. Okay, I can feel that. It's kind of like me looking at my notebooks at home. All right. And so if we think about it, all right, so we have that. We have an idea of how to move into the cloud and data literacy in that regard. If we're, let's say I'm not sure if I really want to start this yet, right? If data pillar is still pretty scary to me. We've talked a little bit about Snowdens and things like that, and Snowden being an operative term for insider threat. What are other risks to mission success and both maybe even regulatory noncompliance? What are some of the different risks from that, from if we don't adequately enforce governance across the board?
Yeah, I mean, like
Snowden's the risk.
Snowden's the risk, right? I mean, in commercial entities.
I hate using his name all the time, but yeah, might as well use him as an adjective.
Yeah, like I read recently, again, in European Union, any AI model built incorrectly, they can get fined. 7% of the company's revenue would be the fine that they have to pay.
7%.
7% of the revenue. Right. So, wow. I mean, and granted, we don't have the any of those AI laws yet, I think, except Biden's executive order.
Right.
Right. So we don't have anything like that. But
which is just an order.
Exactly. So right. So anything breach of data not only causes revenue issues, can also cause other issues with the mission statement of an agency.
So that would be. Let me think of something along those lines. If we were. Actually, no, let's come back to that. I can't think of something off the top of my head on that one. So let's move on a little bit to kind of data security, zero trust. We've talked about it a little bit along the way. But if we're talking about observability and data access controls, what's kind of the optimal way that you think we can combine that with an Alation to really operationalize zero trust around the data pillar?
Yeah. So an Alation in that example would be a perfect lens to all these different aspects of the business: data observability, data access control. A catalog, if you like to think of it, it's like the Google for data, right? If I come to Alation and look for a certain data object, it will not tell me, the access controls, who created it, and also, the classification of the data. So Alation can be like a launch pad to see all that information.
So really, while you're not providing the data access controls themselves, you're providing a map of them.
Exactly.
So that you understand where you need to provide better controls, where maybe there's too much access or there's not enough. Or in some cases, like literacy, how do I make better use of this? Look, we spent the funds.
Yep.
We created this data.
Yep.
We need to now provide access to it. And from a zero trust, normally in zero trust, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about data access and data controls and data, science in general, it's the opposite story.
Absolutely.
We actually need to provide data.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the first point that we talked earlier in the beginning, is most of the times in zero trust, you kind of lock the data saying that I want to block the
Thou
access to the
shalt
data.
not have access.
Exactly. By looking at the data, the usage, how the data is being used, there may be instances where some of this data is needed for day-to-day work for all the users. Just opening that up may help people do their jobs and answer questions, make decisions on the data. So Alation will show you that information, will show you what has been accessed, what data sets has been accessed, and you can prioritize which of those data assets you want to put under, put access controls around it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So if we were to take that a little more, let's kind of drill into that a little bit, right? So from a zero trust perspective, because I think we keep saying this in a lot of different ways, and let's see, back up. From a zero trust perspective, normally I would say you can't have this data.
Yeah.
But from a data democratization and leadership and literacy perspective, I want to provide data that they should have, or at least provide the accessibility to provide it to them eventually as they need it.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That's fair. And again, I just want to rephrase that. It's not the data, it's the metadata that we provide.
Right.
So the people with the right access will be able to actually get access to the data, but we are only providing the map, the metadata, the data about data to our users.
Okay.
So I just want to be clear on that. Yeah.
Right. That's actually a really good point, because that's, in the data security world, we were joking about it earlier, right?
Exactly.
If I can grab 15 pieces of metadata of what this exists, and I know the author, I'm going to look them up on LinkedIn and, I think I know what this was written about.
Absolutely.
It might not have everything that's been blocked out because, whatever. But so if we think about that a little bit, let's go ahead and kind of shift over, right? There is an old term of cyber hygiene. And cyber hygiene generally meaning that most people look at it as this might be applying patches, maybe rebooting the server, those type of things. Well, that also applies to data as well, right? Because data ages out, data is inaccurate,
100%.
data has been replaced. How does Alation, both from a visibility and analytics, how does it kind of help with that cyber hygiene perspective?
Absolutely. We don't call it cyber hygiene, we call it data hygiene,
What?
right? So data, like, our data being
We
stale.
just rephrased it. It's not data. It's not cyber. It's not cyber data.
No, I'm going to use
hygiene.
that. I
There you
love
go.
that, data hygiene,
There you go.
cyber hygiene. So
We'll figure out which way it goes.
yeah,
later.
exactly. So in terms of keeping the data up to date, because the end of the day, you put something in the catalog, it's going to get stale, and just like putting
It's like an old cracker.
putting food in the fridge, right? You have to keep.
Actually, that's a horrible term. Scratch that one.
Which one is that?
Data,
Crackers?
yeah, that's a horrible phrase.
yeah,
Nathan, remove that. All right. So,
No.
so as the data gets stale,
Yeah, it's stale. So we want to ensure, and I'm going to rephrase this so we can start from scratch. So
Great.
It's pretty funny joke, by the way. So,
it is.
so
but
going back,
it is. Yeah.
how do we keep the data up to date or data catalog up to date? It is like the process is going to be, we have something called bots, BOTS.
Okay.
So bots keep an eye on the catalog and it notifies the owner of a specific data asset saying that, hey, this data has not been touched since 6 months ago. You
Okay.
need to go update the classification or the
So it's like an
actual-
old-fashioned web crawler.
it looks at our catalog and it basically keeps it's like a housekeeping bot, if you will.
Okay.
And it tells do certain actions, whether maybe I need to ensure the PII policy is applied correctly. It can automatically do that for you. So end of the day, Alation has these bots that keeps hygiene of the data.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the bots themselves, just to rephrase that, the bots themselves are essentially web or data crawlers that are looking for when the last time it was updated, when the last time it was changed, and if it's specific data like, say, PII or time sensitive, that it needs to be updated again. Maybe
Exactly.
from a compliance
Yeah,
perspective.
and again, in a data world, you're dealing with hundreds and thousands of tables.
Petabytes, yep.
People don't have time to go look at each tables or each columns. Having this notification or setting up this automation will alleviate a lot of these manual, tedious work.
Is that something that's done automatically, or is that something I programmatically do?
It's again, it depends on agencies. Different agencies have different policies. So we basically provide a template, and we'll also help you write some rules too if that's what you choose. But end of the day, you write the rules on top of us.
All right, so better to support the mission, you can go ahead and create the rules themselves to make sure that the data is up to date, valid for the constituency users.
Exactly.
Works for me. So we've discussed data across the maturity model, and in my mind, one of the biggest problems we have, one of the biggest challenges the data pillar itself has is both from a data sprawl perspective of that data, the data has so many different owners, so many different creators, so different custodians throughout an organization, whether that is a federal agency, whether that's inside the agency, sub-agencies, et cetera. But at the end, there's the creators who maybe want wide access, their data to be widely available. But then there are data limiters and custodians who go, wait. You can't because of classification, because of sensitivity. Where do we strike the balance, or how can we use a living data catalog to strike the balance between applied zero trust, data democratization, and control of the data sprawl itself?
Absolutely. I mean, that is definitely a delicate balance, right?
Just a little bit.
Most of the organizations create their what we call a data silos, or like a duplication of data to basically to drive some mission within their department. Right? So that is the reason they probably do that. And of course, the security team hates that because the data is being replicated in many places.
Yeah.
And that means you have to put access controls on multiple data sets. And it basically creates more work for both the teams. End of the day, you're absolutely right. Data creators did it for a reason. How do we control that? So Alation, once we catalog these data assets, you will clearly see who's using the data. So this way you can track back to see if Jeremy is using the same data set multiple places, why does we need access to both those sets, right? You can kind of munge, going back to your word, you can munge it to see, is there a way we can eliminate one data set and consolidate just having one data set? So this kind of gives you the underlying how the data is being used, and this way you can avoid data sprawls.
So let's bring this back from a data sprawl perspective and data control, and really understanding where data literacy data governance are combining to provide data literacy provides the map of how the data is used.
Yep.
I want to use data governance to then lay controls on top of that. Because now that I understand how I use data, I can say, well, I don't need access to these 4 supporting pieces because I'm only accessing the top end.
Yes.
Right. So, table A leads to table B, which creates table C. I only need access to table C.
Yep.
And that's something that Alation can provide, that relationship map from a governance perspective, so I can apply zero trust principles across that, limiting it so I can only see C and not A, B.
100%. That is our core competency to understand how the data is being used. So this way, it allows you to apply those trust principles on top of it.
That works for me. I think that's one of the things I've struggled with is understanding, how can I, as a security engineer, as a security architect, apply governance in a way that still allows researchers to research, still allows democratization of the data, wide branching of the data, but protects me as an organization, protects my agency's mission, protects my nation's mission, and security as well.
Absolutely. And that is one of the reasons a lot of business users create their own data silos, is because they want access to the data, but security team does not give the access to data. So they end up saving everything in an Excel spreadsheet, create shadow systems. By doing what we just discussed earlier, it's going to eliminate all these.
You just hit something that we hadn't discussed yet. Shadow systems.
Shadow systems.
It's shadow IT, shadow data. That is something that, from an Alation perspective, you're core for, right? I mean, that's you can discover that data, that shadow data that we didn't even know is there today.
Yeah, the answer, and I don't want to say try to uncover that, but you're absolutely right. Like you said earlier, a lot of times, the Doom example you gave us, they don't even know if they had that data available, right? So by doing that, if there is a shadow system that's been created, you will be, once you Alation connects and catalogs that, you will be able to uncover that too.
Because that's directly out of the data literacy. The data here is being used. Why is it created secondary policy over here?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And that's not something we'd really discussed ahead of time. But that's, I can see shadow data and those shadow systems. It's a real danger. It is a real threat to cybersecurity overall, both from a nation state, from a nation state algorithm. So if I don't know it's there, as a cyber guy, I don't know how to protect it. I don't even know I need to protect it.
Exactly.
All right. That's cool. What's the next steps?
Yep, absolutely. It's a great question. It's a very painless process. Go to alation.com, click on the data maturity model link.
Okay.
Or contact
See it there on the link.
Yeah, or contact your Alation or the Merlin rep, and we can set you guys up. And again, like I said earlier, this is a 20-minute assessment. It's a very short assessment. It's got some examples. And once we get the results back, we will come back and do a short workshop to give you a journey map on how to proceed with your data program within your agency.
That's fantastic. Hey, Deepak, I want to thank you and Alation for coming here and joining us here at Merlin Cyber for this. I know it's always a trip. You came all the way from the West Coast just to talk to us. That's fantastic. I look forward to continue this and can't wait to see what's next.
Likewise, Jeremy. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks.